Hey crafters! In this video, I'm going to talk you through some of the basic overarching principles of using text in your projects from a graphic design perspective. This is the first video in a two-part series. The second video will show you how to use text in Design Space, what features and functionalities are available, and how to get the best result on your Cricut machine when you go through to make it. Before we dive in, I want to be clear that I'm going to be using the terms text and fonts in this video. Purist graphic designers would refer to typefaces, fonts, font families, but for this beginner's introduction, I think we don't need to go into the weeds as much as that. Let's first cover why it is important to understand how to design with text. First off, your choice of font has a big impact on your design and the message that you're trying to share with your audience. You need your design and your font to work in harmony. Let me demonstrate this with an example. What do you think of this design here? Say we're going to use this on a greetings card, a With Sympathies greetings card, and we've used this dinosaur quirky font. It's quite obvious that this font doesn't make sense in the context of this project. I've used a very glaring example here, but this concept will always apply. So always pause to reflect. Does your chosen font make sense with the projects you're working on, for the purpose it's going to serve and the audience it's going to have? Secondly, fonts evoke an emotional response in the viewer. Let's take these two as an example. On the left, I have a font which clearly is a happy, a quirky, an upbeat sort of a font. But this is very different to the font we have on the right, which portrays much more of a sense of gravitas and formality. It's much more of a serious font in comparison to the first one. And finally, you may not be aware of this, but statistically speaking, up to 80% of your project design is actually the text. So your choice of font, your placement of the words, these are all really important factors when you're designing and creating your projects. Now that we understand the importance of text, let's move on to the different types of text or fonts that you get. You can see on the screen there are 4 different kinds of fonts: serif, sans serif, display, and script. Let's start with a serif font. A serif font has these little hands and feet extensions on the letters. This is definitely more of a traditional font, and it is good to be used for long sections of text as it's easy to read. For us as crafters, we would more often want to use this kind of font if we are working on a project that's going to have blocks of text, because this works best in the printed format, and generally we are creating things, physical things, with our Cricut machines. A sans serif font is one which does not have the hands and feet that you would find in a serif font. And for those of you who remember your GCSE French, sans actually means without, and serif refers to those hands and feet. This is more of a contemporary font, and it is also good for long sections of text, but in a digital format. So if instead you were working on a poster or a blog post, something that you don't intend to print, then this would be the kind of font that would be best for your block sections of text. Display fonts are good for displays, so things like banners, billboards, headings. You wouldn't use these kind of fonts for long sections of text. And display fonts can have serifs, or they can be sans serifs, so without any serifs. Finally, a script font has this handwritten calligraphy style to it. You can also use this for displays, but you wouldn't want to use it for long paragraphs of text because it's harder to read. Also important to note is script fonts don't work well as all capitals. Let's now move on to some of the basic principles of designing with fonts. So I'm clearly trying to hammer home the point here, but it is important that you do not combine too many different fonts in one project. Your design is going to look cluttered, it's going to look unprofessional, and you'll find it hard to find lots of different fonts that work well in harmony together. A good rule of thumb is to use 2 contrasting fonts. One decorative font for your headings, and another font for simple blocks of text. So you can see an example here. We've got a decorative font for the heading, and then a very simple font for the block of text. And again, think about, are you printing or are you not printing this project? And choose between a serif and a sans serif font appropriately. For us as crafters, we may want to apply this same rule of thumb, but in a slightly different way, and use the 2 contrasting fonts to provide emphasis to a certain part of our project. So if you look at this example I've got here, I have changed the font of this last word, craft, to give it emphasis in this quote. So those are some of the key principles when it comes to using text in your design. Of course, as with any kind of designing, these are guidelines and rules like this. They can be broken, but you do need to know how to break them. So it's important to understand the rules so you know how to break them in a way that remains pleasing to the eye. Another tip I have is not just to stick to the fonts that are the default system fonts that are on your computer, and in my opinion, even the Cricut Access fonts. You're going to get so much more flexibility and creative autonomy by looking at font websites online and finding exactly the right font that works with your project. On the screen, I'm showing you some options of websites you can use to download fonts. You will notice on these websites that the fonts are organized into the 4 categories of the different font types that we discussed earlier. So now you know what they each mean. And if you want to know more about downloading fonts and how to get them in the Cricut Design Space, I'll link the video that I've done on exactly that below. That's about it for this tutorial. I hope you guys learned a lot, and make sure you check out part 2 of this mini series where I'll show you the tools that we have in Design Space for using text, how we can manipulate it for our particular designs, and how we can get the best results whether we are cutting or writing with our Cricut machines. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy crafting!